Welcome to another installment of This Is Not Normal on the Political Drain podcast with Drill Sergeant Doug, aka Admin Doug, a U.S. Army veteran, teacher, musician, and family man from Jamaica, now fights for justice and democracy through commentary and humor. Follow him on YouTube at Political Drain and at Sons of Liberty Official as Drill Sergeant, aka Admin Doug, continues to protect our freedoms.
Last week, the Department of Justice released a controversial memo. It authorizes states to send Americans with disabilities to institutions, nursing homes, psych wards, segregated schools, rather than funding the community-based services that allow them to remain at home.
What's up, you two? Drill Sergeant here, and we've got some training for the resistance. We've got some history lessons for the resistance, and there's some information that's especially for my black folks out there, for the brothers and sisters. As James Brown used to say, I'm not that talented. He had the voice of an angel. Anyway, here's the deal. What you saw first, that clip there, may very well seem abhorrent just as a human being. The humanity of it all, right? Just as a decent person. But you need to understand resistance, the history of this. You need to understand that it is the playbook that they've been using, which is the normalization of dehumanization. This is the type of thing that you have to do in order to carry out a Holocaust. This is the type of thing you have to do in order to carry out a Holocaust. Most people that have a bias, most people that have a mean streak, most kids that tease and bully disabled people realize at some point when their brain fully grows and they become fully developed that they don't like doing that, seeing it, not where they are, not by themselves. In a group, it gets easier. In a society built on it, it becomes second nature, commonplace. Look away. I'm gonna let you watch this. Afterwards, there are a lot of pieces, a lot of things as a resistance you need to understand about this memo and about Stephen Miller. I'm sorry. I know. I know you just dried up, women. Everything just dried up immediately as soon as I said that. I'm sorry, but we have to do it. Watch this.
Last week, the Department of Justice released a controversial memo. It authorizes states to send Americans with disabilities to institutions, nursing homes, psych wards, segregated schools, rather than funding the community-based services that allow them to remain at home. This would undo decades of community integration reforms, including longtime Supreme Court precedent that was designed to allow those with disabilities to live independent, productive lives. This week, we learned that White House Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller was behind that memo, according to Bloomberg Law, who spoke to people who were briefed. And while spokespeople for both the White House and the DOJ denied that Miller played a role in the memo, this attempt to remove folks with disabilities from their communities tracks with his exclusionary vision for this country. Miller is infamously obsessed with demographics, crowing just today about deporting Haitian migrants and refugees. Under his watch, DHS has produced a trove of state propaganda, which experts say promotes white nationalist slogans and iconography. He is also, of course, the architect of Trump's draconian immigration policies. And as the New York Times reports, during a private meeting during the last presidential campaign, Trump reportedly told staff that Miller wants to deport more than 2/3 of this country's population, leaving behind only those who look like him. For its part, the White House denies that reporting, but it certainly seems consistent with an ethos that says, if you can't deport your undesirables, at least hide them away.
If you can't deport your undesirables, at least hide them away. Here's the deal. Number one, this rat-faced, Nazi-loving Jewish person, that's him, self-hating. I'm not going to get into any more insults. This is too important. If you can't deport your undesirables, at least hide them away. For the black people, we all know that we have been the one thing drawing, kicking and screaming, dragging them, this entire country, into decency. If it was not for black people in this country, there would just not be the rights and the laws and the privileges that every other person of color and every other minority community, including disabled people, would enjoy, to enjoy, could enjoy. They would not exist. We have taken this country kicking and screaming into the proximity of decency, decade after decade after century after century. So black folks in this country don't need to learn empathy, is what I'm saying. We brought it here. We brought it here. It's imperative that we remember, just like how it stems from our fight. Everything later, no matter what side they hit, rises back up to our fight. Now, the reason why they want to do these things to the disabled folks, and the playbook that I'm talking about isn't just Project 2025. The playbook I'm talking about is the Nazi playbook. I'm going to read something to you, and hopefully everything will become clear. If you can't deport your undesirables, at least hide them away. This is what the Weiner Holocaust Library has to say about that. People with disabilities were some of the first prosecuted under the Nazis. The Nazis believed that people with disabilities did not and could not be a part of the German master race. They believed that they were genetically impure and a financial burden on the state. Ultimately, this view led to the murder of thousands of disabled people. The Nazis started their oppression of people with disabilities shortly after their rise to power. Shortly, immediately. The law for the prevention of genetically diseased offspring, more commonly referred to as the sterilization law, was passed on the 14th of July, 1933. This law named 9 disabilities and forced anyone with them to be sterilized. These disabilities ranged from severe physical deformity to epilepsy to chronic alcoholism. This is important. This is the point. The laws ranged from deformities to epilepsy to chronic alcoholism. Just like Stephen Miller being a Jew and having Nazis who support him. It doesn't matter if you're white or Jewish. It matters if you serve the system or not, if you serve the masters or not. The dehumanization isn't just about the dehumanization. It's about the normalization of dehumanization, meaning as long as I can make you disagree of this person's humanity, it's not far for me to make it any person. Well, now alcoholism. Well, wait a minute. Now, if you smoke, how many of you MAGA folks out there smoke? You think it's not coming for you? Well, it's not just the people who have diseases and addictions. You know what else it is? If you have a fear of water or a fear of heights, everybody with a fear of heights. Well, how do we judge if you have a fear of a height? Let's push them off a roof and see. What that means for the resistance is every one of the laws, every instance of the normalization is a detriment to the resistance. So if you may look over or overlook, is the actual better word for something that didn't catch your radar, that's okay. That was on purpose. That's why I'm calling this resistance training. That's the training. Is to see it everywhere because you saw this one slight. You see this one thing that happened and you saw somebody go off about it. Was it necessary? It was because when you get trained into seeing it everywhere, you stop it. You stop it immediately. But if you get trained into the normalization where sometimes you miss it and sometimes you don't, it's whatever you miss will be the avenue they use. Does that make sense? Whatever you miss will be the avenue that they use and why it seems like it never dies, always germinating. The spores are always opening up hundreds of years later, while the mushrooms are still growing and nobody planted any seeds. They're just floating everywhere. They're waiting on every little chance. And every normalization moment, if not picked up and not attached onto immediately, will be what they use. And next time, it'll be chronic alcoholism. Let's listen to this part.
So why have there been these regulations that mandate community integration where possible? What are the benefits of that for the individuals who are affected, for economic outcomes? Why has this been such an important fight for the disability community?
The disability rights laws and these integration mandate regulations come from a very ugly history in our country when people with disabilities were segregated away in institutions. RFK's own father went and visited one of these infamous institutions in New York, calling it a snake pit. And that is what led to really a push to create community services. The vast majority of people can and want to live in the community. It's cost effective and it leads to better outcomes. Think about it. It is community services that allow families to keep children with disabilities in their own homes. It's what allows children to go to school with their peers in their neighborhood because of these community services. We have disabled coworkers. We have people with disabilities that are part of all of our community. And that's why these laws are so critical. And people in the disability community have fought for decades. These are hard-won rights that are at risk with this memo.
This is also not the first time that this administration has gone after Americans with disabilities in some way. HHS floated an autism registry. RFK Jr. has made repeated ugly comments about Americans on the autism spectrum never being able to lead productive lives. You have the president and his top civil rights official using a slur for people with intellectual disabilities. Can you put this decision in the broader context of the administration's approach to this community?
It's been a pretty astounding last year for people with disabilities. Just in the same week as the Department of Justice memo came out, the Trump administration announced moving all of the programs that support students with disabilities out of the Department of Education into the Department of Health and Human Services, segregating programs for students with disabilities from programs for students without disabilities. This is on top of a $1 trillion cut to the Medicaid program, which funds the very services that we're talking about that help people live in their own homes and in their own communities. And so people with disabilities are now across the country navigating threats and cuts to the very services that help them stay in their own homes and in their own communities. The president's budget proposes eliminating very important programs that support people with disabilities and their families. And that is just a handful of the long list of policies that are incredibly harmful to people with disabilities and their families.
In the brief time that we have left, I want to drill down on something you said earlier about it being cost effective for people to get these services while they are still living in their own homes. You have been tracking the huge cuts to home and community-based services that states have been undergoing in an effort to save money because the One Big Beautiful Bill cut Medicaid spending. Why are states doing this? Won't it cost them more money in the end if they kick people off of these programs and ultimately have to institutionalize a larger share of the population?
Well, it is true that it is cost effective. We can serve 3 people for every 1 person in an institution. The reason states are cutting these important community services is they know people will do anything to stay out of institutions. We are already starting to see with the states, almost half of states already starting to cut services in response to the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, H.R. 1. And we are seeing people trying to find ways to manage. Families having to leave their jobs to fill in and provide those services and supports. We see people who will do anything not to go into a nursing home, people who are making choices about maybe I won't get a shower this week, maybe I won't be able to get out of bed, people who are willing to even die in their own homes to avoid going into an institution. It is an existential threat for the disability community.
Why the laws are so critical. What she said there is what I'm going to next. When you're able to otherize people or to have enough people agree that it's okay to put them over there, you get Delaney Hall. Why in Nazi Germany were they able to go after the disabled first? Well, because they weren't as racist as America. You realize that, right? You realize that, right? You realize that what America is doing now to ease all of the white people and all of the people who are wanted here in their minds, which, if you heard the first clip, is only a third of the people who are here. I don't know how they think they can run a country with the third of people who are here. Anyway, what eased them into it was the racism first. Nazi Germany wasn't as racist. Nazi Germany used things like Jim Crow it was in Mein Kampf. It's in the literature. What Hitler used as a means. So segregation, the Jim Crow laws, all of these things were invented by this place. This place has such a comfortable history with racism and xenophobia. Nazi Germany was less racist than here. So they used the disabled, because if you see someone disfigured, you go like that. It's human nature. Doesn't mean you're bad. It means you have to work to get over that. When you see a trans person, if you're not around trans people all the time, then you very easily can go, I'm not sure what they were, but oh man, I don't know if it was a man or a woman. And when you're not around them all the time, and then you say that, it becomes this close, this far away from someone who hears that saying, what the hell is wrong with you? You getting defensive, and now you just cut it off. In other words, they make the division there by taking away the other. You can put them over there, you can put them over there. They started it with the Hispanic people, but you can't just do that with disabled people. You can't just do that with all black people. They're too close. What she says about them going into these facilities and finding out what was being done there is what caused them to come up with the new law saying, we got to keep these people close and at home. Allow me to read again. Following the sterilization program, the Nazi persecution of people with disabilities soon escalated. In the autumn of 1939, the Nazis, led by Philip Bohler and Dr. Karl Brandt, initiated a euthanasia program of people with disabilities. This program was codenamed T4 after the address of its headquarters, Target Taska. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, 4. Unlike the sterilization law, T4 was never formally announced, as the Nazis tried to keep the program a secret. The program focused on people with disabilities living in the state-run nursing homes and hospitals. Doctors and nurses in these institutions were asked to complete a questionnaire on each individual patient. The staff in the institutions were told the questionnaire was to collect statistics for the government. And the real purpose of the survey was to establish victims, was concealed. Once identified, the victims were transported on buses to one of 6 killing centers. Why it's important to move them away, to put them in a home, to take them out of your schools, is number one, for the normalization of dehumanization. Afterwards, once you've normalized that, you stop asking what happened to them when they're in these facilities. America started with the racism because that's what would be easier to stomach for the majority of Americans who were white, and some are black. And even for, turns out, the majority of Americans who are brown. Unfortunately, it will never stop. The excuses will always be there. Alcoholism, weed, wrong hat, pork eaters, it doesn't matter. It's all made up. It's all a vessel to fuel the hate, to keep the constituency focused on anything but themselves and voting for their own demise and not being called to activate due to their comfortability with dehumanization. And when I say that, comes part 3.
Allison Barkoff led disability enforcement work at the Department of Justice. She is currently the director of the Hirsch Health Law and Policy Program at George Washington University, and she joins me now. Allison, walk us through what this memo would mean in practice.
So this memo is shocking in its reversal of 50 years of policy by the United States government that states should provide services to people with disabilities in their own homes and in their own communities instead of locking them away in institutions, hiding them away from society. And what this means in this reversal is that the main enforcer of disability rights laws has now said, we are not going to continue with that work. That's going to mean settlement agreements being undone, new positions in court, and the memo talks about undoing decades-long regulations that have been in place.
As always, with these fascist type of governments, if you've noticed, all of the state-run things are the problem. But I bet you the institution they're going to go into will be private. I bet you, for the love of money, those private institutions won't mind doing what I said would happen in part 2, where they'll just send them to be killed in another place. In Tilly Detention Center, in Delaney Hall, in Whipple, And Alligator Alcatraz that is now thankfully closed down, in large part due to the vigils that were going to freedomvigils.org. Go there. See where they're planning the next one, because they actually got it done. The point is, none of this works without the money involved. All of this, the reason why Nazis will be okay with Stephen Miller, even though he's Jewish, is because they know that in the end, what can happen is they will get the contract. Geo Group is probably already building an insane asylum. It's already building a place to hold people with disabilities, including autism, including epilepsy, including deformations of the hand, the feet, cleft lip, cleft palate, baldness. Without the money, without the institutions that are private, making sure that all of this goes through, none of this goes through. That's it. That's the rub. That's the rub. So the way we fight is also through the money. It's time for the boycott. Many of them. It's time for the slow down completely of the jobs. It's time for the slow down completely of the jobs. It's time for every sick day and every work day to be done. It's time for unions to do what they were supposed to do, what they were built for. And too many of them now have turned a new leaf. I have a lot of work to do because I personally need more access or relationships with people who understand the money. If you do, or you know people, hit me up. Without them, without those institutions, without those private companies, thoughts like this, what we're seeing here, become non-existent, unfathomable, and unable to be pushed into a reality. Fascists always collaborate with the rich, and then the rich believe that they are cocooned and protected from the fascism, so they don't give a fuck. We have to make them pay. That cocoon must break. There's a lot of ideas on that. I'd like to hear more, and I'd like to get it started immediately. We can do one thing, though. 7 days in D.C., June 28th through July 4th, happening D.C., Washington, D.C. I hope to see you guys there. Time to fight is now. Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind. The kind that moves. But here's the thing. None of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're going to pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads. It's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works.
That was the Political Drain podcast, which can be heard on www.groovechillradio.com/political-drain and can be viewed on the Political Drain YouTube channel anytime. Once again, thank you for listening to Groove Chill as we resist fascism in any form, pursue democracy, peace, and love.